we spray it, and about 4 days after we spray it, the crop pretty much dies, and we go, okay, that one's not going to make it. But at the same time, we do see some gems that allow us that we can label the expanded use of pesticides for Delaware vegetable farmers. One of the projects that we had this year was looking at herbicide rotation with vegetables. So one of the things when you're selecting herbicide, you need to know how long it is before you can plant a vegetable after that herbicide is applied. So for a lot of our vegetable growers that are growing corn and soybeans, a lot of the herbicides that they may use, possibly could use in corn and soybeans, they can't use and rotate the vegetables in a timely fashion. So a lot of times farmers are going to use the same herbicides year after year so they don't run into rotational problems. The issue there, though, is you're always using the same mode of action, the same herbicides. You're selecting for weeds that those herbicides don't work well on. So you start to build up a population of weeds. They may not be resistant. It's just those weeds that are a problem. And I'll give you an example. We're seeing a lot more fall panicum out here. Fall panicum is a grass that we've had for years, but we've seen a lot of it in the last few years. Don't have a good explanation for why, but it's one of the most common questions I get. We do know that fall panicum is not very well controlled by dual and harness, which are herbicides that a lot of our vegetable growers are using. However, a product called Zidua, it's very effective on fall panicum. But the label for Zidua doesn't allow you to use it this year and plant most of our vegetables the following year. So we've done trials looking at, can we plant earlier? Can we plant within 9 months of using Zidua under our conditions? And so a lot of that work has been funded through IR4. And so stay tuned as to where we go with that research. One of the things that we did this year, and I should have done a better job of planning, but we wanted to look at relative crop safety of a lot of our common herbicides for crops. And in order to evaluate that, we wanted to plant early so that the crops may go in and may be under some stress because it's cool. They're not growing as fast. But that also meant that we planted a lot of our vegetables all at the same time in mid to late April. And I had about 5 or 6 studies like this, and just keeping up with them was a challenge this year. But we made it, and we harvested the last one yesterday, so we made it through that part. But we wanted to look at crops: peas, snap beans, seeded cantaloupes, and sweet corn, and help to provide better guidance on if you're planting early, meaning the crop is going to go slower, won't metabolize the herbicide as fast, which herbicides are more likely to cause injury? Or a better way of looking at it, should you be switching your herbicide programs for a safer one? So this was just the first year of it. We're going to hopefully repeat it next year so we can have a little bit more confidence and consistency in our data. But just some of the things that we saw: peas, we found that dual was probably the most injurious one for peas. Not something that we would recommend based on 1 year of data to use dual on early planted peas. Praw was another one that was not quite as bad, but we did see some injury out of Praw. Command, Pursuit, 2 other common herbicides for peas, were relatively safe for our early planting. So it gives us, some recommendations on if you're planting peas early. Stay away from dual. Be very careful about using Prowl. You may want to think about Command or Pursuit. Snap beans, we looked at Pursuit, Command, Reflex, Dual, and Sandia. The only one of that group that we had any concerns with was Sandia. We saw stunting with Sandia. It's a common thing that we see often when we're using Sandia on a lot of our vegetables. Um, but again, just confirmed a lot of what we thought we were been seeing over the years by being able to plant them and evaluate them side by side under the same conditions. Um, we had a trial with seeded cantaloupes, and we looked at Tree-Far, Curbit, Command, um, and they were all very safe. We had Sandia out there. We got quite a bit of stunting with Sandia, and for our purposes, because it's not labeled, we did look at prowl. We get questions about prowl a lot, and prowl was way too injurious. It's a good reason it's not labeled. It just really reduced our stand and significant injury in there. So again, this was just our first year. I often say I don't like making recommendations based on 1 year's worth of data. So we're going to be repeating that and looking for some more consistency in our results. We have a project behind us, a new one this year. We're looking at cantaloupes, and we're looking at no-till planting of cantaloupes. We've done a lot of work with cover crops and grain crops, and we were a little bit interested in how is there a benefit to some of these cover crops with some of the vegetables. So this year we got a no-till planter sitting right here, which will allow us to plant transplants into a no-till situation. Kyler spent time getting it all set up for us. We had less than ideal conditions when we planted because it was quite wet, but there was projection of more rain behind us, coming behind us, and we went ahead and planted anyways. And we ended up with a very good stand getting the transplant established. One of the things that we did, we had two major factors in this study. One, we sprayed the rye cover crop about 4 weeks before we transplanted. So while there was some rye there, it was very limited amount of rye. Basically, we were spraying it when it was about 12 inches tall, and by the time we planted, really had no impact. So we were basically planting no-till at that time. The other treatment was we went in with that rye and sprayed about a 16-inch band. We sprayed that with glyphosate to kill the rye, but left the rest of the rye growing in the plots. And then about a week before we planted, we went in and sprayed that the remaining rye with glyphosate. So we had a lot of rye in the plots, and we had planted to a very narrow strip with the no-till planter. Again, we had good stand establishment planting in there. The one thing that we did notice, and maybe from your angle you can't pick it out, but where we had the narrow strips, so the rye grew a little bit longer, we had a narrow strip with no rye. In those plots, overall, we had much better weed control than where we're planting it as a straight no-till. We looked at a variety of different herbicide programs. We sprayed those herbicides prior to transplanting. We wanted to see if we got some of that herbicide down into the transplant slate, if it was going to impact growth. And overall, we saw very little injury, if any, except for the same culprit, Sandia. Sandia was stunting our cantaloupes. We just did our last harvest yesterday. We had 8 harvests out of here, and there was no difference between any of the treatments as far as cantaloupe yield. So very encouraging with our first go around with no-till transplanting and no-till with a cover crop situation. So we're gonna kind of kick back and talk to a few people who have tried this and modify our studies and see where we want to go with this in the future. Has anyone been planting no-till cantaloupes or vegetables like this. Okay, we can chat later and see what what you've got to say about Rick and what we might be able to do differently. So, all right. The other study we did this year was beans, snap beans. We were looking at, you know, when a lot of our herbicides are going out, our post-emergence herbicides are going out, there's usually multiple products in the tank. There's the herbicide, there's the adjuvant, there might be an insecticide, and there's more and more folks are putting fertilizer in with those sprays. So we wanted to look at some different fertilizers in combination with our post-emergent sprays. A lot of growers are doing it because they, one, to help the crop, but two, they feel as if they get herbicide injury by having that fertilizer in there, it overcomes the injury faster. My question is, if the crops are responding faster and overcoming that injury quicker, what about weed control? If are weeds going to be impacted by that? So we looked at the two most common post-emergence herbicides for snap beans. We looked at Vasagran and Vasagran and Reflex, as well as Raptor and Vasagran. And we looked at three different fertilizer combinations. One that was heavy on macronutrients, one that was heavy on micronutrients, and one that was more complete, both macro and micronutrients. For just because I get asked sometimes about sugar, we threw in a treatment with sugar, just plain old sucrose on them. What we found was with both the Reflex Vasagran, Raptor Vasagran, any of these additives, these fertilizers, had no impact on injury. We got the same amount of injury. First of all, we got very little injury, and the fertilizers had very little impact on that. What we did notice, though, particularly with the macronutrient fertilizer, was that our weed control wasn't as good. So more weeds survived as a result of having the macronutrient fertilizer in the tank compared to not having it. We set up the study so that when we sprayed, the weeds were a little bit tall, so we thought that we'd be able to pick out differences a little bit better. So then what happened was that initial spray didn't give us 100% control of the weeds. The fertilizer allowed them to recover. They became they grew. I won't say as they ever fully recovered. The weeds were, come harvest time, were still 7-8 inches tall. They weren't huge and robust, but they did recover with that macronutrient. We did a similar project last year, and we didn't see that effect. So again, it's why we try to do studies over multiple years, different environments, and looking for the consistency of our results. One of the things we noticed in that plot, we've seen it 2 years in a row now, was we have a lot of Palmer amaranth here at the farm. Palmer amaranth that we have, not just here at the farm, but throughout the state, is also resistant to glyphosate, and we know it's resistant to group 2 herbicides. Raptor is a group 2 herbicide, Classic is a group 2 herbicide. But what we saw this last year and again this year, the Palmer amaranth that we had in this plot were all killed when we sprayed Raptor out there, which thought, hey, this might give us an opportunity to give us another tool. Last year, when we saw that, in the fall we went around the state. We collected about 18 populations of Palmer amaranth, grew them in the greenhouse, sprayed them with Raptor, sprayed them with other group 2 herbicides, and our population here was the only one that the Raptor killed. So it's not going to be a tool that we can use throughout the state. but it was just an observation we had made. I talked about it last year, and at other times I just want to let you know if you may have heard that some of our palmer might be still susceptible to these herbicides. Across the state, that's not the case. I just want to put in a plug for folks that are using pesticides. Be aware that a lot of our pesticide labeling is changing to reflect the full adoption of the Endangered Species Act on pesticide use. So this is something that the labels have not addressed completely in the past, and they're starting to change. And as new products are labeled and as old products get re-registered, they're going to have to comply with the Endangered Species Act. So there's going to be mitigations on those labels to reduce or eliminate drift, as well as mitigations to reduce and eliminate runoff and erosion. We had some products this year that were in the marketplace that required those type of mitigations. Liberty Ultra for one, but I've seen since midsummer, EPA has released about 7 or 8 new pesticide labels, and they're all going to have these restrictions. So go to the EPA Endangered Species website, read up on it. You're going to hear a lot more about it. We're going to talk about it at Ag Week and go into a little bit more detail about it, but it's just something that we're going to have to comply with, and it's going to be a matter of keeping records more than anything else.